Yes, everybody. Post early cup exit, post question marks, which we'll definitely be speaking about the mighty Ange. I'm still in love with the big Ange, but we're feeling a little sore. We're feeling, definitely not as excited, about a big cup run as I thought we would. I did say in my early season predictions that we would actually go as far as the semifinals and actually both of the cup competitions, but turns out that's not going to be the case. Looks like Ange is maybe learning a lesson that previous managers have learned in the past with certain players. We'll get all into it. Good to see you guys all staying up late or maybe waking up to this. I know, there's so many people around the world. Some have had to stay up really late and then into the early mornings to watch that display. Some are staying up really late and still, thinking about the match. But we do have Jacob and Michael from joining us, and start with you, Jacob, to my striker next to me, to keep me comfort. How are you, Jacob?
The fearsome twosome, here we are. First of all, I just want to say hello. How are we doing tonight? I know that the mood is low, but there's a lot of things I think this evening we learned. I know we'll get into it. I know a lot of people are pretty down and they feel pretty down. Honestly, we expected and we knew these players were capable of this level of performances. We all knew this. But as Ange Postecoglou coming into this, how many times can he say, I've given X, Y, and Z a chance at their various positions in a big time performance versus a Premier League level competition, not, Singapore Sea City Sailors or whatever they were. This is Premier League level competition away. I'm going to give them all a go. Let's see if they grab the opportunity at hand. And as you can see, I think, as you can see, they didn't. But I think that this was every single person on that starting 11. I think it has something to prove to Ange Postecoglou yet, and that's why they were starting. Richarlison and Van de Ven included, because Van de Ven we've seen 3 matches, and this is the first time we've lost. So I really feel like it's okay. The wheels haven't fallen off this thing just yet. I know maybe we went out the cup a little earlier than we were hoping, and I'm not saying Ainge doesn't get any part of the blame, especially when it comes down to that rotation. But I'm all good. It's all good. I feel like
Part of the learning curve, just quickly,
yeah,
you think
yeah.
about?
You
Yeah.
take an L and you learn from that, and that's what Ange
Mm,
Postecoglou is exactly going to do. And I have no
yeah.
fears about that.
Yeah, well, and we'll definitely have some questions about that, right? Is this all part of the learning curve? Do we just need to relax, But Michael, you're staying up very late into this evening, so I imagine you're not relaxed and got some things to say. How are you?
Yeah. Uh, Before I talk about this game, I want to echo, in a sense, a part of what Jacob said. I don't think this result is damning in any shape or form. I still think it's important for Ange to see that type of result, to see that type of performance from some of those players. I think he will learn from that. I don't think the wheels have fallen off, exactly as Jacob has said, right? I'm just really pissed that we got knocked out of the Carabao Cup, right? I think one thing I'm going to say is that if he really wanted to give those players a chance, I would seriously prefer if we did it in the Premier League and fielded our stronger 11 in the Carabao Cup. I am so starved for something positive, in terms of a long cup run or treating those competitions seriously, right? That I would much rather see a rotated squad at Bournemouth and lose to Bournemouth and go through to the next round today rather than what happened, right? And one thing, because people were saying, why didn't we field 11? Why didn't we field our starting 11 today and rotate for the Burnley game? One thing in defense of that, and it's really kind of a strawman argument maybe, but Burnley's game is after the transfer window already concludes, right? So in a sense, if you wanted to like gather more information, gauge those players' performances, this was the last chance to do it before the transfer window shuts, right? And on the game itself, we will talk about plenty in the upcoming minutes, right? So yeah, I'm just hugely disappointed with the result. Not gonna lie. You are muted, Jack.
My bad, Michael. Thank you.
No worries.
I agree with you. Actually, you actually wish the Burnley game were sort of in a perfect world it were sooner, and then you would get another chance to sort of you would rather them play those guys in that game. But this is the one that he decided to take those risks in, and we'll get into it. But let's just greet the chat just quickly here, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you for, like I said earlier, either staying up late or waking up early throughout the throughout the evening, because some probably watch this very very early. In the early hours, and then have decide to take it into the early morning. Big up to Callum. Hopefully you're keeping well, my friend. Yeah, we're going to get into that first 11 with all the different changes. Hopefully, Colin, talking ball, you're keeping well. Maybe you have some sort of good coping mechanism by now as a Spurs fan. Phil Coys is in the house. Big up to you, Phil. Absolute legend. Hopefully you're keeping well, my friend. Alpesh Patel's in the house. Dr. Tottenham, turn yourself in. Is it a Dr. Tottenham situation? I don't know. I mean, Jacob, give me a quick answer. Is it Dr. Tottenham?
No, absolutely not. No.
Feels different. Feels different from the Dr. Tottenham. Feels like it's stereotypical of where we've lost in the past. Very carbon copy of how we've lost before in the past. But I wouldn't say as much Dr. Tottenham. But Alpesh, like I said, maybe we'll have some debate about it. Big up to Matareo. Hopefully you're keeping well, my friend. Patrick Duffy's in here as well. Don't need for any Ange hate, my friend. Lee Nary says last chance for players who want to stay to fight for their place. Ange has the proof. Now, I sort of spoke about that at the watch along, Lee, where it felt like some of these guys could have actually bought themselves, a little squeaky, kind of end of the window. They sort of find themselves, kind of where they go under the radar. If they were actually imposters all along, they could have just at least put in 90-minute performance, and then sort of everybody might think, oh yeah, Sanchez is actually good enough, or Ben Davies is a confident left back, etc. But almost every single player today had an absolute stinker. So just sort of now think almost all of them or
Also,
maybe putting themselves back to where they were. I said they kind of put a lot of themselves back to square one all of a sudden, I think, with the fan base again.
yeah. Also, Jacob, just quickly before we continue with greeting, right? Because the previous comment that you read out, no need for Ange hate, right? I am going to criticize Ange today. I wanted to say Conte out of habit.
I heard that.
I am going to criticize Ange today for the lineup, right? But it's not hating, right? I'm not hating on him. I still love the guy. I just think it's valid criticism, right? Because I think that he didn't field a strong enough team considering the opposition, right? But before anyone slates me in the comments, I'm not hating on him. I love him. I want him to be our manager forever, right? But it's just I want to prefix that. Just
I wish
not hate, right?
This is a very American or a very Yank thing. Maybe Jake would understand it. There used to be these things called fat heads where you could put them on your wall.
Yeah.
Wish there was an Ange fat head that I could just put somewhere and just go and hug it, right now, and just tell him it's okay. He made a mistake, and we'll move on from it. Big up to you, Shamu. Hopefully you're keeping well this evening. We also have P Dubs in the house, Rhode Island's finest. Good to see you as always, my man. Rich is in here. Good to see you, Rich. Daniel Field, he's saying, I agree with Jacob. Yeah, most of the time we always agree with Jacob. He's always speaking some sense. Good to see you, X-Tal, as well. Hopefully you're keeping well, my friend. Anthony, good to see you, Anthony. I imagine you usually don't go as much to the away games, but I know you go to plenty of the games. Hopefully you're all right this evening. Donovan Osterreicher is in here as well. I don't want to see Ben Davies wearing a Spurs jersey again, let alone the captain's armband. Donovan, talk to me about it, my man, because there are a lot of players that I feel like people are saying the exact same thing, insert X, player's name, with that exact sentence in there. I don't want to see Sanchez wearing a Spurs kit again. I don't want to see, even other players in the team were pretty terrible. Højbjerg, one of the worst performances I've ever seen him put in. Skip, one of the worst performances I've ever seen him put in. A lot of players, even the Gio Lo Celso apology forms are not coming in anytime soon by the looks of things. So lots to talk about there, Donovan. Good to see you in the house, my man. Ellie's in here as well. Ben Davies is not competent. I agree with you, Ellie. And there will be, was that Højbjerg's last match, Ellie? And didn't go out with a bang in any way. Did not do us the service that we needed. And it's not the Højbjerg that I know, Ellie. But hopefully you're keeping well this evening. And you're staying up very late tonight, Ellie. And hopefully Tio is keeping you, maybe, some hot chocolate or something, some good Greek food. Anything, good Greek food that keeps you, up late Jacob, that doesn't put you to sleep? Because I feel like a lot of Greek food would put me to sleep, late up at night.
That's because it's so wholesome and filling.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, I think
That's what
maybe
tasty food does.
tonight's a taco night. Get some avocado and some peppers and jalapenos in there.
Greek
Spice it
salad,
up
maybe.
a little bit. Yeah, I'm trying to think of Greek food that I could, but honestly, it's also wholesome for me. If I had a lamb Edo right now, or two, I prefer two lamb Edos if I could get that. But I'll settle for. So I need something spicy to keep me going through this. That's what I think. I'm gonna have some spicy tacos tonight.
Big salute to Mia as well. Good to see you in the house, Mia. And then as well, Ellie, I know you don't sleep because Spurs and Højbjerg are always keeping you up at night. And this is going to be one of those nights, Ellie, for sure. Everybody, if you could do us a favor, smash that like button, please. And as well, keep getting your comments in. We're going to get them up on screen, but we're going to try to be, as efficient as we can today. Just, get everybody's thoughts on the day and move on from this. But as well, we need to talk about it, right? And, we're going to talk about everything from maybe the mistakes made from Ange to just some of the individual, shocking performances. So please keep getting your comments in, also as well, if you want to, at some stage have your own say, on some of the things that happen with Spurs, feel free to grab a membership, come on and, have your say on the fan shows that happen every Monday, all that good stuff, everybody. But let's get straight into it. Might as well just talk about the one that's on everybody's mind. I'm not going to do what I did to you last time, Jacob, where I, dangled the Richarlison question, sort of halfway. Let's just talk about what, the big question thing is Ange, did it all start with him? I sort of put it in the watch along where it's like, if you were to speak about where the first mistakes were made, right, before even a ball was kicked, is it technically on the manager, in that situation? Is that where the first mistake falls, is him maybe picking certain players that ended up having such howlers? Is that where the first mistake was made?
I mean, you're asking him to paint you a Picasso. Meanwhile, he's got crayons. What you expect the man to do? He wants to see who he has in the squad that can actually help paint the picture we're all trying to see. We knew this wasn't going to be an overnight fix. We knew this wasn't going to be one summer and we got all the business done and now it's up to Ange to really truly get it done. And he's been truly back to the extent in which the left side and the right side of the argument are both agreeing that yes, Ange Postecoglou has been backed. I think it's just hurts more because it's a competition where I think a lot of fans had that little bit of hope where it was like, we might go on and do something here. And I understand that. And I can definitely relate to it. But at the end of the day, this is a chance. If we're talking, he does this, let's say the cup competition was flipped with Burnley. Let's just say hypothetically that, and we do this and we drop 3 points. And then he can still say the same thing, right? But at the end of the season, it might be a little different conversation. We're talking about a difference of 3 points, whether it's making Conference League or not. Obviously, that remains to be seen. I just see it like, you know what? He can only do what he can do, play the opponents he can play. It's unfortunate we didn't get like a Carlisle Town or whatever, some little Milton Keys or somebody that we could say, yeah, this justifies that lineup. But I see it as he gave everyone a chance versus Premier League competition to prove that they can play in the position that we're hoping they can back up. Because if we're talking about squad depth and longevity over the season, we're going to need at least 5 guys who can come in and impact the match in a positive way. So I think
you see this as a very serious trial run, basically, that he gave them a very serious swim test right before the transfer window and everything for some of these guys. And
there's no excuses.
See what you're made of in the real situation, right? Enough practice, enough pre-matches, and preseason games, see what you're made of in this high-pressure situation.
Preseason games, I mean, West Ham, everyone said that was their B team. Singapore Sea City Lions, I don't even know who that is. And we didn't even play Leicester. And then Shakhtar. I mean, these are teams that you can't, if Giovanni Lo Celso balled out versus them, but can't do it versus Fulham on a rotated squad as well, then obviously that shows that Giovanni Lo Celso isn't the guy that we're all trying to play him up to be. Solomon showed a lot of the things that he's lacking. I felt like everyone in this squad showed the holes. And again, it's a first loss really under Ange Postecoglou that matters. So I guess that's why at the end of the day, I'm not too upset. And I still feel like this was a chance for Ange to now say, look, I've proved to you why Dyer can't play. I give you the Barcelona game film. There's all the examples you need of why he doesn't work in this system. Now he can look at this 11 and say, this is why I need a striker. Look at Richarlison. Yes, he did get the goal, but outside of that, he wasn't very impactful. Solomon, this is why I need a backup right winger. This is why he can go and justify, I need a third option center back, because Davinson Sanchez is not that. There's a lot of things that I think, if this, I said this on Sean's show earlier, if this was a court of law, he has piled up his evidence to now go to the jury, which he has a deadline of 2.5 days from right now. And he has his evidence now to say, look, this is why this doesn't work, X, Y, and Z. I'm not talking about Jose, Conte, Nuno. This is a different scenario completely, because we were still chasing what we had with Jose. And we all know that Nuno and Conte was just what it was. So my point being is, this is a completely different scenario. So when I look at it, that's why I'm not too upset, because it was a matter of unfortunate timing that this cup game happened before the deadline. That's my opinion.
Well, Ange might kind of agree with you there, Jacob. I kind of disagree with you. I'm curious to see what Michael says in a second. But Ange, some quotes that came from an hour ago.
A lot of people do.
He says, how am I going to find out about my players? We need to give the players the opportunity to contribute. And I think that's sort of right in line in what Jacob is actually saying. So, him and the big Ange are actually sort of on the same line here. Michael, where do you line? Are you a bit frustrated with Ange and seeing it that way, or are you kind of with Jacob, where you just feel like, yep, they got to get tested at some stage, and this was the time, I guess, to do it?
Both agree and disagree with Jacob in it. I know it's strange to say, right? But
tell me why you disagree first.
Okay, why I disagree. I think we weren't playing against a championship side or a League One side or whatever, right? And Fulham, whether you think they are good or not, they are still a Premier League opposition, and we are so starved for anything positive in this fan base, right? That going out in the Carabao Cup second round to Fulham after you fielded a second team pretty much, right? 9 changes. I can't excuse that in a sense, right? I feel like we should have treated both this competition and the opposition with more respect. I know those players need to be tested. I know, like, they need to be given a chance, or Ange needs proofs that they are not good enough, right? I just wish it happened in a different fixture, right? That's why I disagree. I agree that it needed to be done, right? I agree with the principle. I agree with the idea of giving those guys a chance to play against the Premier League opposition, right? I just think if that really needed to be done, which this is the part that I agree with, right? If it needed to be done, that it should have been done in the league. And I get the argument of what Jacob said, that those 3 points that we might have lost against Bournemouth might mean that we don't qualify for X competition or Y competition, right? But I think for majority of Spurs fans, it would mean more if we progressed further into the cup rather than achieving Europa League or Conference League, right? It's really a peculiar situation, because I kind of want to blame Ange for today, right? I don't think we should have rotated 9 players playing against Fulham, right? If we were playing against, I don't know, Rotterdam, like the bottom of the championship team, right? Then I would completely agree with the lineup. I think even if those players are subpar, I think still they could quite easily beat a rotated. They could beat a lower tier opposition, right? The issue was that it is Fulham, right? I would much rather see us field like a team consisting of, let's say, 6 to 7 first team players and 4 rotated squad members, right? And then after 45 minutes, I think Fulham were average today at best. I think they were quite bad, honestly.
I think both teams were terrible.
Yeah, both teams were pretty bad. I think if you fielded a team consisting of 6 first team players, the ones that we saw in the previous 3 games, I think we would have absolutely smothered all over them in first 35 minutes. And then again, there is an argument that if we did that, then there is no test for those players. If the opposition is already beaten, you can substitute 5 players and they won't show you anything because there is no stake in the game anymore, right? But the only issue I have with it is that it was a Carabao Cup game. It wasn't a Premier League game. It wasn't a friendly, right? That's my issue, right? I wanted us to treat this competition with respect and put it as a priority, right? And that lineup showed me that we really we weren't distraught with the idea of going out. It wasn't like waiting on them. I know the changing room will be devastated, whatever, right? But this situation should not have happened, in my opinion.
For me,
that's why I kind of agree and disagree, right?
Before, there's a thing that's really conflicting for me. I think some people are sort of now they're looking at maybe the initial mistakes that Ange made with the first 11 that he picked, and then they're also now combining some of that with some of the in-game decisions that he made with and I think I want to touch on that later. But if you sort of were to follow the path of where it all went wrong, right? Where did it all begin? It technically all begins with the manager and with the team he did pick. That being said, though, a lot of these guys and a lot of these players, I just want to say here, have made it very difficult on this club as well as this manager for getting, for trying to get rid of them. How many times have we seen certain players have moves accepted? And like I said earlier with Sanchez, it wasn't just the Russian move that was accepted. There were plenty of other moves to either France, moves to Spain, and others that have been kind of linked or quite close to happening, and Sanchez did not accept them. And if he wants to continue to stick around and fight his way, or sort of like in whatever way, kind of just find his way to stick at Spurs, he will, I guess, eventually get picked for these sort of games, and that means he will be put under the pressure and he'll be put under the firing line. And yet again, he's making sort of the same mistakes and looking just as shaky as he had years ago, that Dyer as well as Davies has looked shaky in the past. And Davies, I think I'll get onto now as well. Davies is sort of a player that I also feel like has, in a way, I think often is more seen as a steady Eddie. But when I think we give him this responsibility of the captaincy in the first place, I think that was a mistake by Ange. And that's before a ball is kicked, right? He decided, I guess, in his lineup to give Ben Davies the captaincy. For 2 reasons, I think that's wrong. I think Ben Davies is part of like that old mentality of certain players that I think was wrong in the first place. He was one of the guys that got Nuno sacked. I know it, was good that Nuno got sacked at the end of the day, but he went above his manager and went, to Levy into his office and, kind of made a coup about getting the guy sacked in the first place. So from dead off, that the guy, has a certain type of power and a certain type of mentality. But also, what we had a problem with was like constantly playing sideways, constantly playing backwards, being really negative. And Ben Davies was one of the biggest contributors to that. And so how on earth is he going to then tell other players, to do what Ange wants, which is to play forwards, never stop, keep pressing, be positive on the ball, be progressive. And Ben Davies can't be the guy to communicate that message because he's not doing it himself. He would be the biggest hypocrite to be doing that. And that's where I think also maybe one of the mistakes at the end of the day Ange has made there is the initial 11 also involved a certain captain that I think should not have been there. I think he should have probably kept Sonny, as the real captain, in the team, or Romero or James Maddison. One of them should have been there that we know would have been able to communicate Ange ball message and communicate something to the team and also lead by example. Romero leads by example. Sonny leads by example. James Maddison leads by example. Ben Davies is usually not a guy that leads by example most of the time it's on the pitch. He's a steady Eddie, vanilla ice cream type of defender. So that's where I think another mistake is made there at the end of the day. There needs to be someone else that should have been given that captaincy if you really want to see what we're been used to in terms of the Ange ball. But we can get into go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
If anything, I think that if you really wanted to fill that exact 11, I would much rather see the captaincy armband on Perisic, for example, because he's a forward player. He's old, he's experienced, he speaks English, all those things, right? I know that he's his tenure in the club is way lower than Davies. So Davies probably gets the captaincy armband by default, right? Because he's the longest serving player, yada yada yada, right? But as you said, it's just shocking, and I know we'll get into like personal, like individual performances of players in this game, right? Because one thing I said about Ange is the thing that I said, right? I criticize the lineup, in my opinion, the occasion. We didn't play the occasion, in my opinion, right? But with that being said, I still think that this team should have put much more of a fight on paper, just on paper, than they did, right? Some of those individual performances were bloody shocking today. Some of those players were useless on the pitch, and I know we'll get into it, so I'm not going to start going at individuals right now. But yeah, because then if I started going into those players, I might as well lead the show, right? Because I can talk for 30 minutes straight. So yeah, sorry, Jacko. I just had
no. That's where I wanted to begin, on the Ange mistakes, and I feel like I'm glad I have Jacob on because he's offering a bit of a different opinion on it, and we will talk about what Jacob is saying, and that is this all kind of part of the learning curve. But I just sort of think before a ball is kicked, like there are certain things I wasn't really all that happy with, and also as well, I feel like my heart, really did sort of sink at least a little when I did see Sanchez, initially picked into the team. I did feel like a lot of us spoke about we want to just see a solid back line for the most part. We did sort of tolerate, I think, there being changes at right back, maybe changes at goalkeeper, but we did kind of want to keep Romero and Van de Ven the same. But at the same time, I kind of might as well just fire it, kind of back at you, Jacob. Did you, when you see Sanchez picked into the team, did you kind of just initially, in that moment sort of think, okay, this is, we'll see how this goes. This is Sanchez's trial run, or were you a little worried? Did you see that maybe initially as, a surprise? Where were you when you kind of saw that decision?
I wasn't really surprised because I knew all along that he was our third option there at center back. Now, if he's our third option and that's the kind of shift he puts out versus a Premier League side opponent, I'm not talking about Barcelona in a friendly. I know we'd love this trial run to be during a friendly, but we can't have an actual trial run. Like a surgeon doesn't keep practicing on dummies. Eventually, you have to practice on a living and breathing human being. And that's just the reality of the situation we're in. We are in that rebuilding phase. We are laying some good foundational work. And I think that, yes, you have to go out there and show, look, this is why this person doesn't work in my system. And he's done that. My hope is that this gets the club to then act and say, yes, you're right. Maynard Solomon isn't a good enough right wing option behind Kulusevski. Yes, Emerson Royale may struggle against better opponents. Davinson Sanchez should not be our third option at center back. Richarlison, pretty much invisible for the minutes he was out there. Ivan Perisic, I thought he was all right. He did mostly, the best thing I saw from him was just the aggressive
really
play.
Poor, actually, to be honest, on the day. And we'll talk about
there was
the
a little
individual
shove,
ones,
but that was
I was just sort of thinking, like, what you're saying, I think, and I think you answered it, but I think I sort of meant, with how you feel right now, which is like, what, this is all part of the learning curve. Did you have that mentality maybe going into it, maybe with some of the changes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's what we're seeing here. Can Oliver Skip fill in behind Papa Matasar or Rodrigo Bentancur? We don't know, but I think today answers maybe we do know. Maybe he is not good enough. Absolutely atrocious ball playing I saw from him. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg as well. He had one of the best opportunities of the match, and he absolutely fluffed it.
2 good chances, in my opinion, and
I'm remembering that one where he just shot. Shot it way to the right. How's that Ange's fault? How's that Ange's fault? Pierre-Emile Højbjerg can't shoot. He worked with these bums enough to get them into a position to where they could take their opportunity, and they can't. We all know this, right? We all know this as fans. We've seen. Phil Coys was saying that. We have years and years of evidence. We have years and years of evidence under Jose, Conte, etc. But how can Ainge say to the board, I know for a fact this guy doesn't work in my system, if he doesn't have video proof of this player playing in a position in which they're supposed to be the backup? That's my point.
Mm.
He showed that the backup keeper's not good enough. He showed that the backup left back's not good enough. The backup center back is not good enough. He showed the holes in our squad depth, and that was what was on display today.
Yeah,
Say what you're about to say, Michael, and then I have one more question on my, things about, mistakes from Ange, and then we're going to go into kind of the players' individual performances.
yeah. So with your question about the starting 11, right, and Sanchez, for example.
Yeah, what
If-
was your mentality
if-
going in?
If we fielded a team with 6 or 7 first team players, right, and Sanchez was there, one of those 4 or 5 players that were the substitutes, I wouldn't be as worried as I was today before the game, right? I think my issue is when I looked at that lineup with all 9 changes that I saw, that made me worried, right? That made me, okay, I get the idea. I'm not, but I can't agree with the personal choices, right? I think we should have fielded a stronger team against Fulham. As simple as this, right? I don't mind seeing Sanchez. I don't mind seeing Davies, Royal. I don't think that it was a bad choice. But I think if Højbjerg really wants to leave the club, then why the hell is he playing today? That's one of the question marks I have.
Yeah.
I know we don't have a lot of cover in the midfield, but I think his role at best in the system is securing games like he did against Bournemouth and Manchester United. He offers no progressive thoughts. Why the hell was he on the pitch, especially with the added context of his supposed transfer out, right? I think we should have at least fielded, as you said, one of the 3 captains that Postecoglou has chosen, right? I wouldn't mind seeing, for example, Sonny up top, with Perisic on the left and Solomon on the right, and Sonny taken off after 45 minutes after the first half, and Maddison being substituted, so that one of the 3 captains that he has chosen is always on the pitch, right? That was a really strange choice for me. So that's
some representation should have been there from the leaders. I agree.
Of that way of his play, right? Because you can clearly see the first 11 gets it, right? The first 11 understands what we are here to do, what we want to achieve, right? With those players that were today on the pitch, seriously, 9 of them I want out of the club pretty much, right? And that's why I was worried about the lineup.
This is just on that though, Michael. Though, just I do have to stop you there. Where where I get a little confused on it, because I saw some of the worst individual performances, and this is why I do want to spend some time on that. Each player individually, because I genuinely think whether some guys I still want to stay at this club, some guys genuinely had some of the worst performances I've ever seen them have in a Spurs shirt, today. And that's not being all that dramatic. I really saw some moments of just piss poor quality from a lot of them. And that's where I, really am, emphasizing that a lot of them need to be read some sort of manifesto or something, from us at the Irish Hotspur, read some sort of some rights, because it really was, atrocious from plenty of them. I was going to ask you though, Michael, can I fire a question back at you just, up before we move, so we can move on from kind of the Ange mistakes? There's some, question marks over the mistakes he made in game, right? He didn't sub, Fraser Forster. Some thought maybe he could have thrown in Vicario for the penalties. There's also the question over maybe some of the substitutions. Could they have happened sooner at halftime? Bringing Gio off instead of bringing off Skip and Højbjerg. There's also other substitutions that people, I think, were maybe upset about. I don't know. Did you feel like there were any mistakes he made kind of in game, as a manager?
Going through your question step by step, with goalkeeper, I don't think that subbing a goalkeeper it happens as often as people think it does. Even before, even if you know that the penalty shootout is happening, I think it's just a Louis van Gaal special in the World Cup, right? I think that's just his thing. And also, I want to say, Forster's performance during the game was actually quite good. I think he
made some good saves.
Better players, right? It's just the penalty shootout was absolutely atrocious. In what he did during that penalty shootout was atrocious for me, right? But so that's the goalkeeper thing. With other substitutions, it's a bit hard because like I'm not surprised he substituted Gio off because he was absolutely ghosting in that game. I honestly sometimes forgot that he was even on the pitch, right? And you now you have to wait whether his performance was worse than Skip's and Højbjerg's. Both of them were atrocious as well, right? So you kind of have to choose one of them. I was really surprised that he brought on Scarlett, right? That was one thing that really like stood out for me as something that I completely did not expect because it kind of suggested to me that we changed the system, which we haven't done yet in any of the.
They went like to a 4-2-4. It almost even
Yeah,
looked
4-4 or 4-2-2, however you want to call it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We changed the system, which was really strange because I feel like as soon as we brought Scarlett on at halftime, right, our midfield was even worse than it was because whether like Gio was ghosting, but at least he was present. Like I know that ghosting means that he wasn't present, but you get the point, right? At least sometimes he offered an avenue for Skip or Højbjerg to even have a chance of playing a forward pass. The fact that they didn't take it is another thing, right? But I think that was the one substitute that I was really surprised by. Then with like all the others like Madison, Son, Papesar, and Kulusevski, I think those were fair and good, substitutes, right? They needed to happen because the game was running away from us, right? We needed to make first team substitutes.
What do you think, Jacob? Was there any mistakes in game made by Ange, either substitutions, tactical, anything that he could have done differently?
To me, what it said by making Dane Scarlett the first substitution and at halftime, no less, what that told me was that, yes, this is him saying, can I get any juice from this lemon? How do you know until you squeeze it? And we ain't really had a chance to squeeze the lemon of Dane Scarlett in an Ange Postecoglou system. I'm not sure what his performance tells you, but I'm hoping that it does tell Ange Postecoglou something. That's at least how I see this, because I feel like why else would you bring Dane Scarlett on at halftime if it's not to see what can he give you in 45 minutes that maybe someone else can't? This is a trial for everybody, and I know some people don't like the fact that it was in a cup match. We had the momentum, etc., etc. But again, when is the good? There's never a good time to test yourself, life or death, is there? No, there's not. But you have to do it at some point, and that's kind of what I saw this as, was him saying, here's an opportunity for you as well, Dane Scarlett. What can you show me in a forward position?
Yeah.
And what could it be? I don't know. I would have to go back and watch him individually to say this is what I think he could have. But again, subbing him at the 45th minute indicates exactly what Ainge has said in the post-match press conferences, which is, how do I know what I have if I haven't given it a chance in what I'm assuming it to be his system, the way he wants to play ball? How does he know? You don't know if you can see, you don't know if you're going to sink or swim until you jump in the water. I mean, that's what held back a lot of humans from traveling to other parts of the world. But once you set sail, you figure out what kind of boats work and what kind of boats sink. And this is one of those boats that definitely sinks. And there's a lot of proof. Yeah.
One thing that I mentioned that I didn't like with the Scarlett substitution was that we changed the system with it, right? So kind of if you want to give Scarlett a chance in this system, why did you change the system, right? Because we weren't playing a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3, however you want to call it, right? We swapped to a different formation. So I'm not against giving Scarlett a chance. I just think if he really wanted to test him, Richarlison should have been the one coming off. I know in hindsight, Richarlison scored the goal, so it was right to keep him on the field, right? But it's just at that moment, at halftime, I think if he really wanted to bring Scarlett on, it should have been either Richarlison coming off, but that would kill his confidence, so I kind of get why he didn't do that. So then I think one of Manor Solomon on Perisic maybe should have come off, Richarlison go to the wing and next Scarlett play up top or reverse the situation, right? That's the only thing that I have my gripes with that decision, right? That we changed the system. We never played that system. It looked even worse at times.
It was a surprise. It was a surprise to see Scarlett sort of brought in to change the system. I'm actually not even against him, changing the system, to be honest, in a cup competition where we do need to score and we do need to make something happen. But I do see how that maybe isn't the proper way to really give him, a real chance. I see what you're saying there. Ben Kaufman, member for 2 years, absolute legend. Thank you for your service, my man. Says, my brothers, we're absolutely shocking in the depth department, and we still are not doing anything about it. I think the weird thing about it, Ben, is that it's sort of a two-part system. We have to actually get some of these guys out of here in order to bring in new depth. And that's the issue, is a lot of these guys are making it difficult on us with their own pretty terrible performances that, don't make them really worth very much. But then also their kind of reluctance to even leave in the first place has made it very difficult for us to get rid of them. I know Daniel Levy and the ownership need to do a much, much better job about being more ruthless about it. But let's just sort of be straight. It seems like there are at least 4 or 5 players that are pretty much clinging on to the club and holding us hostage right now and are making it very hard for us to get rid of them despite us accepting moves for them. So that would mean we'd need to rip up like nearly 4 to 5 contracts. I don't know any other club that's done that, in the last 5 or 10 years, really, that's, cut that many contracts, all of a sudden. I think it's actually systemic of our own problem, or it's just, we put ourselves in that situation. That's how bad it is that we actually put ourselves in that sort of predicament. But it is crazy to think about that. Sort of we're lacking in this depth department for 2 things. I think it's because we aren't moving on the players that are sort of our depth sort of players like Sanchez and others that aren't good enough. And then that means we can't bring in new guys to be those sort of new depth options. It's a perpetual cycle that continues to be kind of known by most Spurs fans, but doesn't get really much done about it. Talking Ball, Colin, member for 16 months, absolute legend. My heart sank when I saw Forster so slow and unsure with the ball at his feet. I feel like there's maybe a conversation to be had about he didn't do too well or cover himself in glory with the penalty shootout. But I think Forster was good at the end of the day. He made some good saves. Actually made a save that kept us in the game. One of those ones that, where one of the players was in behind. I forget who it was. It might have been Decordova Reed or somebody was in behind.
Yes.
And he made a very good save. Or a very good save. And I think he is good with the ball at his feet, far better than Hugo. I mean, he brought a tear to my eye last season with some of the, the touches and passes he was making. And today, he didn't have any bad moments, I think, with the ball at his feet. Some of the hospital passes that was played back to him as well. And he just sort of got it launched when he needed to. And then he tried to play out the back when he does. But Jacob and Michael, I'll have you both answers. But Jacob is technically, or not technically, what am I saying? Jacob, you are a member of the, the goalkeepers union.
Got my card laying around here somewhere. Yeah.
Certified.
Forster, he saved what he could save. I think that first goal was not really his fault at all. So I don't blame him for what I saw. And, it wasn't like he was out here making world-class saves, but he saved what he could save. And that's all you can really ask your goalkeeper. Now, if you look at the penalty taking is where I have a problem, because as a goalkeeper, you can't literally do the same thing 5 times expecting the same result. That's a little madness to me. As a goalkeeper, why you didn't just say, F it, I'm going this way. I'm laying out this way. You know what I mean? Game on the line. Yeah, it was very shocking. And that's kind of where I stand with it. Is like, I don't blame him for anything within the 90 minutes, but I do blame him a lot for the penalty shootout. Now, it is harder for a goalkeeper to save a shot. I mean, I feel like a goalkeeper would always say it's harder for them to save it than it is for a striker to score it. And a striker would say it's easier for a goalkeeper to save it. But I think that's just a little bit of the mind games. But he didn't play any of those mind games. You're supposed to try and get in your opponent's head. I think if you have Sicario, the madman, the psychopath out there, being the madman that he is. I mean, if you saw the angles they cut to Postecoglou, he was standing, he was alert, he was into that match. And I think that that is one of the things in which I will say, Angel, you do have to kind of bite the bullet with that one. Like, I don't know what you're trying to prove. If I'm to be presumed correct why I feel the way I feel, that is a fat L on his head, which is why didn't you? I would feel like Vicario still has things to prove to Ainge, and he hasn't played enough in this system yet. So I would feel like it justifies him starting. You know what I mean? That's just me personally. But, these guys played 72 hours ago. Well, how much are we...
Sorry, finish your point. Sorry,
how much are we willing to risk this? But for me personally, that is where I first start to blame Postecoglou, and then I start to look at the penalty takers and in the order in which they were taken. Was that him trusting Davinson in the huddle, saying, when he looks around, says, who feels confident stepping up to the plate? And Davinson says yes. Then Ainge is at fault for believing Davinson Sanchez, but at the same time, why was he third? If that's Ainge Postecoglou, he needs blame for that as well. But again, regards to the starting 11, I don't blame him for much, but the Forster one is where the first questions start to be risen for me.
For me, I think Forster got us to that penalty shootout, so he should get credit for that at least. And I think he did not cover himself in any glory in that penalty shootout. He looked very similar to Lloris, and there's also something to be said about that. Lloris was never any good in the penalty shootouts, and we usually didn't back ourselves in those situations for that reason. But I think Forster had actually a pretty fine game until we reached the penalty shootouts. And he was actually the only guy that I think I wouldn't throw in, the bad category like I would the rest of the players in that starting 11. He made some fine saves to keep us in the game, to keep it at 1-1, and then also was good in possession, like I think he always has been. He's never really had all that many shaky moments in possession that's ever cost us a goal or anything like that. And I'm actually impressed by that because he's older than Lloris and actually taller and, more clanky in a way. And somehow Lloris still couldn't get a ball under control. Donovan Osterreicher with the super chat says, so glad you guys are able to see reason and speak rationally. Many fans are coming on and throwing Ange under the bus. Glad I found my people. I feel like it's crazy to get that fed up with Ange over tonight. I think it's always good to have conversations about what went wrong. Could he have done X thing differently? And, we have to talk about this sort of learning curve for Ange. But I am a little alarmed by some of the real sort of kind of people already kind of gunning out for him and things like that. I think this is always going to be, he's not going to make every step perfectly. He's always going to make a mistake here and there. And this is perhaps one of them. And, maybe some are thinking there's a lot of mistakes. Some are thinking there are a few mistakes, but I think we just get to talk about it for the rest of the evening. And then I think we just sort of move on to it and move on to Burnley and kind of forget about it and see whether he's able to learn from this and apply it to the next cup, or the next tournament of any sort. So for me, Donovan, keeping big love of Ange. And like I said earlier, Donovan, if you ever had a fat head at any stage, I wish I had a fat head of Ange, on the wall somewhere, where after I sort of have all this conversation about what went wrong, just give him a nice big hug after all of this, and we move on from it. But big up to you, my friend. And I'm glad that you found us. I'm glad that you're staying up with us this evening, Donovan. Hopefully you're keeping well, my friend. And would love to have a chat with you sometime on the fan show soon, my man. But we're going to go into now, I think, sort of the individual performances. I think we spoke a little bit about Fraser Forster there. I guess we just have to talk about sort of, I think, the defense. I think Mickey Van de Ven, for me personally, yes, he had the own goal, but I mean, the goal that we did concede, for me, I might give it to you, Michael. I mean, I think that's mostly on Sanchez. I think he got absolutely rinsed by Tom Kearney. He got cut left and right. He got beat on, I think, 2 different moves there. And then he also let the cross go between his legs as well. And then it just ended up getting unluckily hit off of Mickey Van de Ven. And another final point there, I feel like that's 2 own goals now off of Mickey Van de Ven from some poor defending from Davinson Sanchez. I think the Brentford goal too was also poor defending actually on his part as well. That sort of led to a pretty easy shot. And I think Emerson, gets beat in that Brentford goal, but Sanchez was marking nobody, if I recall, for that goal too. So pretty similar in a way in that Mickey Van de Ven I feel bad for. So Michael, what do you think? Sanchez, was he the worst performer on the pitch? Was he the reason we lost the game? He also took the 3rd penalty. I mean, that was a headache of its own. So, I mean, Sanchez, what are your thoughts?
So, with the defense, right? I think Mickey Van de Ven can hold his head high after this game, relatively high, of course, because we got knocked out of the competition, right? But I don't think he made any mistakes in that game. I actually think he handled himself well. I remember one situation where he absolutely bodied Adama Traore, of all people. So, come on, guys, that's not that's a feat of its own, right? But with the rest of them, right? I think that right side of Sanchez and Royal, I don't know what happened with Royal in this game, but he was so slow and so lethargic in whatever he was doing.
In
He wasn't
possession,
passing-
defensively,
yeah, both in possession and both in defense. I think in possession he was really slow to lay the ball off. He wasn't showing up and receiving the ball like he did against Brentford, for example, right? And in defense, he got absolutely skinned by both the left winger and the left back, even, right? Both of him and Sanchez, Anthony Robinson, and I think De Cordova-Reid was playing on the left, right? I think that they just made fool of both Royal and Sanchez defensively. I'm definitely not blaming Mickey van de Ven for the own goal, sorry, because first of all, this ball never should have been allowed to go through there, right? Both through Royal and Sanchez. And actually, if you look closely, Mickey van de Ven was covering the guy that was going to finish the shot, right? And if he wasn't there, if he didn't knock him off the balance, the guy would have finished his chance, right? So it was just unlucky that it bounced off his foot, right? It's just the way it happened, right?
By the way,
And
I see the
Davies, he
chat.
got-
It's not Van de Ven doesn't have 2 own goals. It's only the one. He only has one. He's not our leading goal scorer, but he is tied. He is
Oh,
tied with a few
jeez, I
people.
made it up. I made it up. Was
Wait.
that not an own goal against Brentford?
No,
Yeah,
no, that was Wisa.
Yeah, it wasn't. No,
They
no,
gave it to
wasn't on
Wisa.
goal.
They technically
Because
gave
it
it
was
to
on
Wisa.
target. I think it was probably
Because it was on target. He just he did the finisher's touch and just gave it the little extra, you know.
It's pretty sure they
Misdirection.
gave it to Van de Ven, but okay, like
Today's they gave
But-
to Van de Ven, but Brentford's they did not.
okay,
Go
I'm
back
glad
and
they
look
didn't, 'cause
anywhere.
We're saying they're both his in fault. We're saying
Yeah, still,
Yeah,
both,
it's
exactly.
regardless,
You
yeah.
said both of them weren't his fault, right? And to finish off the defense, right? Davies was absolutely getting cooked by both Adama Traore and Harry Wilson, I think, is the guy's name.
Harry
the guy
Wilson,
that
yeah.
came on for Adama Traore. So much, in fact, that Van de Ven had to step in for Davies and cover for him and actually save our ass from Adama Traore multiple times, right? So at Forster, as you said, I think during the 90 minutes of play, he was actually quite good. But the penalty shootout, I think we'll talk about it, right? So, yeah.
I to be honest though, on Davies in particular, like I really lost it with him at one stage where there was one ball over the top that he didn't even really go for that he actually probably could have won. But I think it was because he was getting just destroyed down that side so many times with those balls over the top that he was just so used to it by a certain stage in the game that he just sort of like actually didn't think he could get there when he really could have. And that's when I was just, losing it with him on that side. And I think, our big issue is that we sort of have thought he's not going to be good enough in possession at the left back, but he's also going to be caught out defensively at times as well. And with Sanchez, just before I get to Jerome, big up to you, Jerome, my friend. But Jacob, just you in particular, I've said it a lot about the guy today. So, your last minutes to say anything about Sanchez, Jacob. I mean, a lot of minutes from him, especially the penalty. It's almost like scripted that he took the penalty.
That's the part where I get lost in the sauce because I don't understand. I don't have a rationale for that. So that's again where I believe the blame starts in regards to the penalty. Or it could start with Forster. You take your pick. But in regards to Davinson Sanchez, I mean, the guy got his opportunity. He had an opportunity versus Barcelona, and he made the most of it. He had his opportunity versus Brentford, and he was at fault for one of them goals that that's how we rated it. And today he was at fault for another goal. We've known this. This is the story of Davinson Sanchez. But now, again, Ange Postecoglou has multiple hours of proof Davinson Sanchez in this system will at least concede one goal. I'm just glad he didn't concede two.
Yeah, and even David pointed out, which is kind of funny and sad at the same time, that while a lot of us were saying, "Oh, Sanchez had a pretty good game against Barcelona," well, we still conceded 4. So,
well, that was because of Wonder Kid
good
Lamine Yamal. He's just a
yeah,
wonder
Yamal
kid.
was going off, but still, how good of a game could it really have been? Jerome is in the house. Good to see you, Jerome. Really appreciate the support, my man. And he says, I know everyone is going on about Ange made a mistake for rotating, but we have up to these games to play. What happens if we go guns blazing for cups, get injuries, and then in the league we would be in trouble? This is the thing. Someone brought this up earlier, Jerome. You look at every other team; they're able to make a few changes here and there, and doesn't seem to be much of that much, a drop in quality, or they're able to at least get by in the result. Whereas with Spurs, always seems to be some sort of like curse, some sort of kind of voodoo around these kind of changes. We always see the usual combination of Davies, Sanchez, Dyer mixed in there, and it's always ended up in some sort of kind of a really, really bad occasion. So you look at it, I just feel
I
like.
can't.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I can't agree with the super chat actually.
Okay.
The reason why is it's like arguing that what if we were to go guns blazing and we got injuries, but we didn't go guns blazing and we didn't get injuries, right? So you can always argue that way, right? You can always say, but what if we got injuries? What if out of our 9 midfielders in the squad, 7 of them get an injury and we will be fucked, right? Sorry for swearing. I did so well not to swear. Sorry, but yeah, but it's you sometimes have to take risks. You sometimes have to treat your opposition with enough respect, right? Again, it's the same discussion that we had at the beginning of the show, whether it was a good idea to rotate as heavily as we did, right? I just think we should have treated both the opposition and the competition with more respect, right? I don't mind rotating some of the squad, but I think fielding pretty much a completely new 11, right? Because it was 9 players rotated from the Bournemouth squad, and the only 2 left were Richarlison and Van de Ven, who played 3 games for us, right? So he is pretty much a new person too, right? New side too. So I can't get behind like excusing Ange's choice completely because we can get injuries. But listen, we could have fielded our first 11. We could have swept Fulham 4-0, no injuries, and then we could have gone to Burnley and sweep them too, right? So you can always switch that. You can always, make an argument to present your point, right? I can't agree with excusing Ange on this one, right? And again, I'm not like hounding Ange or whatever. I'm not hating on him, whatever. I just think he made a bad decision. I'm going to say that I still love the guy, right?
But I feel
that's my point. Yeah.
I feel like you might agree with Jerome here, though. Jacob, or am I wrong?
I actually I agree with Michael in the fact of I don't believe that Ainge picked this 11 to avoid injuries. He picked this 11 to see what they can offer him. That's what I stand by. So I disagree with Jerome in the fact that, but I understand the sentiment of you could get injuries, but you could also not. And James Maddison could have had a hat trick or something, right? Or James Maddison could have had his ankle twist 180 degrees the opposite direction, and he's out for the season. Either one of those things are just as likely, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's the Schrodinger's cat. But at the end of the day, that's why I've always said I don't think this was about injuries. I don't think this was about rotation or fitness. This was we have a couple days left. Can I prove that any of these guys deserve to stay, can give me anything? He can only see that if they're actually tested in a legitimate scenario, not Singapore Sea City Lions. This is the big boy competition. We're going to have to take L's like this. It's a learning opportunity. Now you take the L and you spell learn with it. That's what I say. And I know Ainge has the same mentality. So that's why I'm not too pressed. It does suck. But at the end of the day, when I lay my head down at night, I never once thought legitimately we could win the Carabao Cup if the likes of City take it seriously, if the likes of Arsenal take it seriously. These are clubs that I think if they took it seriously, we have it's a longer shot of that happening. As a fan, in my heart, I kept saying the treble is on until it isn't. That's just how I rock on game days.
No, the double is on, right?
the double is on. Next game day, I'm telling you, the double is on. But right now, it's like, yes, I never expected to go and win in the first season of Ainge Postecoglou. Now, year 2, if he's still starting the same players and we're seeing the same thing, then this debunks everything that I've said, and it also debunks what Ainge Postecoglou has said. But all I've said initially was exactly what Ainge ended up saying in the press conference, which was, I need to see these guys. And that's what I immediately thought why he went with this 11.
I think Jerome probably agrees with that, with Jacob, that everybody needed to give some type of trial run. And you could say, what if we ended up seeing more outgoings all of a sudden from this sort of trial run? What if we ended up seeing Sanchez out the door, or maybe, who knows, Skip loan move, or Højbjerg's move is pushed, sooner, and we then see further outgoings, and all of a sudden more incomings come in, and that could all be, in a way, a silver lining, I guess, in all of it, Jerome. But it all is dealt with a lot of hypotheticals, but I'm really not going to get too much on Andrew's case. I would say there are some mistakes maybe made before a ball was even kicked. I think giving Ben Davies the captaincy was a big, big mistake. I think he really should have kept either Sonny or James Maddison or Romero on the pitch just for that purpose, because I just don't think Ben Davies represents what Ange wants actually on that pitch to be done. He's not going to be able to be a good example of what he wants to be done out there. Yes, he can maybe scream and shout, but he's not going to be able to really be a real example for him. So I think that was a mistake. But other than that, I just feel like Ange is going to learn from all of this at the end of the day. Big up to you, Jerome. And I think you meant, if I'm not mistaken, unless someone can correct me, I think you mean sort of like 40 games, basically still left of the season, or like.
Yeah, that's the correction to the big super chat, because I think he missed the 40 number in that big super chat. But quickly also, because I kind of want to excuse myself with the whole pointing finger at Ange, whatever, right? I just feel like I feel like there were some players that needed resting. When I looked at the Bournemouth performance, I feel like Bissouma, Sarr, Udogie, Son, most likely, Maddison, those guys should have been rotated. I think I mentioned 5 or 6 names, right? So you take those 5 or 6 names, you substitute them with the substitutions that you made today, but you leave Romero on the pitch. You leave Porro on the pitch, for example. Maybe if Porro was tired, okay, Royal suits in, right? I just feel like we should have fielded a stronger, at least a bit stronger 11, right? I think I get the idea of giving those guys a chance. I get the idea of getting proof that they aren't good enough, right? I completely back that idea. I just feel like 2 or 3 names different, and this game would have been much, much different, which we are definitely going to talk about when we get to the midfield and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg's and Oliver Skip's performance.
And
I guess.
yeah, absolutely. Jerome, and he just sort of followed up saying, yes, I agree. I think Ange wanted to see if those players could step in if one or more of our starting 11 is injured. And to be honest, you have to give some of these guys these real life scenarios, these real, minutes that actually cost, us, as fans, it's real high pressure situations. And I guess that's where you get to find out whether these players are really made of it or not. And plenty of them showed to really not be. And I guess guys that maybe he had confidence in before, Jerome, he's now all of a sudden had to have a second look about or a second thought about. And you could see that again, as like I said earlier, like maybe perhaps the silver lining, maybe guys that we would have thought really weren't going to be included, in this team for the rest of the season. He kind of showed a bit of faith to, for example, like a Sanchez. And now all of a sudden he might be thinking, maybe that sort of didn't think about that the right way, or might give that some second thought here. So it could all be silver lining. And I'm also going to kind of just give Ange, the benefit of the doubt that he is a guy that is a self-critic, like a lot of people should be. When you make mistakes, you look at what you did wrong, you look at how things maybe could be done differently, and you're just going to move on from it, and you're going to try to be able to apply it to the next time. What were you going to say, Michael?
Yeah, I was agreeing with you that yes, of course I'm giving him benefit of the doubt, right? It just pains me that we got knocked out of Carabao. And again, I agree with Jacob. I don't think realistically we could have won the Carabao Cup if any of the teams like Arsenal or City would take this competition seriously. We would probably get knocked out, right? But it would be much easier to stomach getting knocked out in the quarterfinal or a semi-final to Manchester City than to Fulham in the second round, right? That's what pains me in today's result, right? That I think it wasn't like an unmovable object that we couldn't get past, right? It was Fulham that played really average. They also made 4 changes, right? So that's why I think with only 3 changes to that starting 11, I think we could have like possibly easily swept them away, right?
A lot of fans have been operating under the assumption that a lot of these players are good enough to be backups. That's what fans have been saying.
we're
And
finding
myself
out.
included. I was like, you know what? Sanchez may have turned a new leaf. Maybe this is, and you know what? That just makes me look idiotic because he proved that he is not a good third option. And that's if we
Would
didn't
you rather
do this,
find out or never find out, I guess? And then when
Exactly.
you never find out, you find
At
out
least-
too late. You find out 30th game of the season.
we at
when
least
it
have
really
2 days
matters
to fix
most.
it. We have
Yeah.
2 days to fix all these holes. And right, that's not going to happen. We all know it's not going to happen, all these holes. But my hope is that now we will see at least maybe 3 more outgoings and incomings affecting these key backup positions. That's my hope. Whereas maybe we were just looking to do the one, Brendan Johnson. And Ainge is using this as a chance to say, no, it's not just right winger. Solomon, yes, isn't good enough, but neither is Richarlison. Neither is Davinson Sanchez as a third option. Neither is Ben Davies as our immediate left back option should anything happen to Destiny. And we saw something can happen to him. He's not invincible. As much as I love you, Goaty, he's not invincible. So this again, would you rather him show this to you now when the transfer window is still open, or would you rather him show this to you round 2 or 3 when we're resting because we're playing back to back? We're playing twice a week in the Premier League. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Or an injury like Jerome seems to be, very worried about, right? Let's say an injury happens and then we never tested some of these guys in the first place. Then we're just hoping that they do well. All of a sudden we find out they aren't doing well. And then we're like, well, what if we tested them maybe sooner? Then we could have gotten rid of them, in the transfer window. So there's that argument. I think it's a solid one for sure. And it's definitely been the theme of this. It's definitely been the two sides of the camps, I think, is right. Did we learn a lot from this? And, is that a good thing that we learned a lot from this versus the fans that are like, I just want to see us go as far in the cups as possible. And I think both arguments are completely valid. Donovan Davis, top man, says, I choose to trust Ange and play the long game. Saw the starting 11, immediately said, this game isn't about winning. Shit. My heart sunk a little when Sanchez was in there because so many of us, Donovan, had sort of brought up that in order for us to win this game, we just needed to see Romero and Van de Ven together. There could have been changes in other areas that maybe we could have gotten away with, but there needed to be solidity in that defense. I guess Ange decided to, give Sanchez that chance, and we spoke, to our heart's content about maybe if there's a benefit in, a silver lining sort of way to that. Now he might think about Sanchez a bit differently, but I did, at least initially before the ball was kicked, delusionally still thought we could win this, but I just sort of was less confident immediately when I saw that first team sheet and when I saw that starting 11. I just was immediately not as confident. I still, like always, delusionally think we will win, but yeah, there was a part of me that was a little just a little kind of cautious, a little sort of anxious all of a sudden, and not as overconfident as usual. But also I feel like Ange, 4-year contract, 4-year road of learning, it's all part of this trajectory of learning on the way and all part of this this huge long process. And I think Ange has finally run into his big high profile moment where, yes, he could have done some things differently, and also certain players let him down in a really big way as well. And he has to reconcile with that and how he might have thought about certain players a way, and he has to think about them differently now. So it's all part of this long road, and nobody's perfect as much as I think Ange is perfect, because I want to buy that big fat head of him and just hug him every single day. I do want to, I have to be honest and realize he's going to make mistakes, and it's all part of the business. Big up to Donovan Davis. Hopefully you keep him well. And I wanted to get onto the midfield, but maybe sort of use Jerome's super chat and as well as C. Shearman's comment here to do that. Big up to you, C. Shearman. He says, I think Højbjerg was more responsible for Skip looking bad than Skip was. That's how bad Højbjerg was. I don't even know if I need to, use C. Shearman's comment in particular, but just onto the midfield here, Jacob. I mean, that was also a huge problem tonight. They were everyone, like Lo Celso, I think maybe my humble opinion was slightly better than the rest, but they were all just terrible. I mean, Højbjerg was one of the worst performances I've seen from him individually, and then Skip had a few moments where I just questioned that man as a Premier League footballer, just questioned that man in general as a midfielder, and some of his decisions, some of his touches, some of his passes. So I don't know, the midfield, I mean, are you frustrated? Do you feel like some of these guys need to go?
All three of them. I think this proved that all those changes we saw, the 9 changes that everyone's very upset about, that we need 9 players in and those 9 out among the rest that were not even featured. I think that's what this all tells me, at least. And I'm assuming that it would tell a much more football intelligent person like Ange Postecoglou something to a more detailed degree. And that's what I'm taking away from this, because while it does suck, yeah, we went out first round, but to a Premier League side, they didn't barely scrape by and win and stay up last season. They stayed up in fancy fashion. They have a game plan they're trying to implement as well. And like, I give respect to him, and I think Ange does give respect to him. And I don't think it was disrespectful, the lineup he put out. The lineup, our reverse team should be able to put up a decent performance versus Fulham. And again, it was a 1-1 draw that we lost on penalties. And we don't even know who our official penalty taker is. I know you're talking about the midfield, but they're just non-existent. So, like, what is there really to say except they pass the ball around, play merry-go-round, go to the left, go to the right. Here you go, backwards, Perisic, backwards, everyone backwards. It was a Højbjerg Orge Fest, is what it looked like. It was just a big Højbjerg masterclass, just a clinic of passing it backwards. I think Harry Winks would have had an 8.0 rating today in SofaScore if he had played, because of the willingness to not be creative. And that's what we saw. Giovanni Lo Celso, I heard, was supposed to be the guy who can come in and be that creative force. He was the first dude subbed off. So if that didn't tell you something, I don't know what will. None of these guys are good enough to play in our backup role. That's what I was told today, and I hope that's what Angel was told as well.
And Ellie says, what we learned is that we need signings of better quality, and we already know what we need so many already need to be shipped out. And I think to Jerome's super chat there, Michael, did you learn anything new about this midfield? I mean, does Lo Celso now need to be moved on? New thoughts on Skip? Reinforcements actually in that midfield? Because the initial 3, the first starting 3, I mean, I've labeled world class, probably maybe a bit prematurely, but whatever, I'm not crazy. But the backup midfield was not even close to that.
Yeah, so just quickly on the midfield, I think Skip and Højbjerg were absolutely shocking today. Like, I get the idea of maybe one made the other worse, but I think both of them dropped their stinker, so both of them just stank together more. I just think, like, if you put a pile of shit next to a pile of shit, it's just going to stink even harder, right? That was the issue of that midfield. I think both of them showed no ability and no willingness to pass it forward, and that's what I meant. Like, Skip and Højbjerg, I think they have their uses in a team, right? I think if you already have a lead, like we did, for example, against United or Bournemouth, I think them coming on then to secure the game, to make it more stable, to beat up defensive presence, I get that use, right? But we can't start with them. That's just not possible. Both of them were struggling going forward. Lo Celso absolutely ghosted the game, but I think it also works in conjunction with how bad Skip and Højbjerg were choosing forward passes, right? They never found him. They never played with him. Actually, when you look like the good performance of Giovanni Lo Celso against Barcelona was with Bissouma next to him, right? Bissouma, he's so good at carrying the ball. He's so good at finding those forward passes, those intricate, creative solutions, right? So that's the midfield. Well, I can't really say I learned anything new. I kind of knew that about those players. I was kind of disappointed with Lo Celso, but then again, I think Højbjerg and Skip playing next to him had an impact on him playing. I also want to see the reaction of Lo Celso, because we know that he likes to throw a bit of a tantrum, and he just got subbed at 45th minute for a 19-year-old kid. So I want to see his reaction. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe that meant that he gets sold right now because he will put in a transfer request or whatever. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. So yeah, that's basically it about midfield. I was absolutely shocked at how bad it was. The drop off between the midfield trio of Sar, Bissouma, and Maddison compared to Lo Celso's keeper Højbjerg was absolutely like shocking. It was shocking how big the gap is.
One of the most dreadful midfield performances I've seen in a while. And I mean, we've seen some dreadful ones in a midfield too, but that was a midfield 3. And then you really have no excuse, I think, in that scenario. Jerome says we need reinforcements over the next 2 days. Don't care if some contracts will need to be terminated. My issue is here, Jerome, is it feels like Spurs are just not really ruthless enough to do it. They just don't seem to be willing to put certain guys in that sort of pressure to move them out of the club in whatever means necessary, whether they have to embarrass them and put them in the under 23s or just pay out the rest of their contract. There are ways to be able to sort of force a guy, or at least make him, really think twice about holding the club hostage. I've said this before, where it does feel a bit unfair that we're put in this situation by these players, but why are we just going to succumb to it? Why don't we just kind of push back in, our own way, either put them in the under 23s, embarrass them in ways in the press, or, make it obvious that, they are just there for the money and they don't really care about their own progression, those sort of things. And you can make players uncomfortable, even if they're still going to pick up that wage packet. You can find ways that they're going to think twice about it. And just feels like Spurs aren't ruthless enough about it. They're willing to hold on to these sort of expensive assets, and it's just holding us back in terms of bringing in that depth that I know you sort of brought up here later, Jerome. You sort of said, I'm more worried about the depth rather than the injuries. I think that sort of interlinks with what you're saying about, some of these contracts not being terminated. If Eric Dyer is going to hold us ransom and hold us hostage at this club, we should pay out his contract and just get rid other players in that defense as well. I think in Sanchez too. I think it's just something that we just continue to find ourselves just being held ransom, and it's in this perpetual cycle. I'm just getting sick and tired of it, my man. I really am getting sick and tired of it. But I don't know. Michael, Jacob, any sort of kind of players that you just feel like just need to, just be shipped out straight away, players that you feel like you're just done with? Sanchez, a Højbjerg, even a Skip maybe, Jacob?
All of them. All 9 that came on, I'm comfortable if all of them got moved on tomorrow. That's how I feel about it. And that's what this was. I mean, do we feel confident in if Kulusevski went down and Maynard Solomon's our option there on the right? I think today it proved that against the Premier League side, he is going to struggle. It's his former team. He had one good shot, and that was fantastic, but got to have more. I just think all 9 that came on showed why that all 9 should be gone, because they can't come in and do a job in a position in which it's supposed to be free-flowing, creative, attacking football. And that's the thing is people say, "Oh, we haven't seen this already. We've seen X, Y, and Z under Jose, Conte, etc." But those guys don't play the same tactics that Ange Postecoglou does. So for Ange Postecoglou to say definitively, I know 110% this guy cannot put a shift in this system, it proves that they cannot. And this is a good thing that he can then take to the board to say, look, this is proof that if I'm to be trusted in my footballing prowess at this club, these guys aren't good enough. And it was on display for everybody to see. You could even argue that 10 of them shouldn't even be here, and the 10th being Richarlison. But again, those 9 subs proved why they're not good 9 subs, and we need new 9 subs. So that's why I feel about that way.
Yeah, for me, like I completely back what Jacob said. I wouldn't be fast if any of those 9 got shipped out tomorrow or in 2 days. I just, like, realistically looking at it, I'm okay. It is just like, seriously, I'm okay. I can live with it if Perisic, Solomon, Royal, Skip stay, right? And maybe, just maybe Davies, but I hope he never gets to wear the shirt. He's just there in case of an injury, right? But I wish as a club we had the balls to tell both Dyer and Sanchez to fuck off, right? And to bring substitutes, to bring real players that actually want to show us something, right? I wish we told Dyer and Sanchez tomorrow, you guys can go. We don't care what happens with you. We are bringing in Tosin, Andribayo, and Per Schutz, right, in your place. just go, leave. We don't care about you.
Yeah.
Like, I wish we had the balls, but the realistic thing is probably one of them has to stay, right? Because you won't sign 2 center backs. And if you want to get rid of Dyer, then you need the left back too, right? And if you want to get rid of Jeremy Højbjerg and Skip, then you need another central mid. So I can't realistically expect all 9 to get shipped on. But I hope this means that we use those 2 or 3 days to plug the most gaping hole in the squad, right? Which is center back, a winger or a striker, and possibly even a second center back or a left back, right?
Yeah, and I agree with Jaden. I don't even get why we're talking about forward players sometimes. We need center backs. If Romero or Van de Ven get long-term injuries, we are effed. Yeah, I completely agree with you there, Jaden. And that's why I sort of would say to Jerome is that a lot of these players that I would rip up the contracts for are actually more in that defense. They're not as much in actually the forward areas or even the midfield areas. They're more in the defense or the players I would rip up the contracts for because they're the ones that seem to be holding us hostage right now. Sanchez has had opportunities to leave. He's had, bids accepted. Dyer could leave if he wants to. He seems to be holding the club hostage. So let's rip up those 2 contracts. That way we can actually get some center backs through the door, my man. And that's how I feel about it, Jerome. And then Donovan Davis saying, what midfield? Completely non-existent. And I think each of them individually were poor. Højbjerg, I back the guy as much as I can. It was one of the worst performances I've seen. I don't think he is a bad player, though. I think Højbjerg is a very good player, but it was just one of his worst performances. I don't think it's much of a coincidence, though, that it comes off the back of one of Skip's worst performances, who I think more and more is starting to look like a guy that just isn't good enough for Tottenham Hotspur. I think on a technical level, on a skill level, even defensively, he's not as convincing as what he once was in the past. I think he's not making the tackles at the same rate that he used to or getting stuck in the same manner. He's not good enough creatively, really pretty much doesn't know what he's doing in the final third. I have real question marks over him, and I think he brings other players down with him. And Lo Celso seems to have done something, that really upset Ange at some manner that, made him, be pulled off at halftime. And then also he was, for the most part, pretty anonymous, and he didn't do what I think most creative midfielders should do when you see the rest of the team struggling. You're supposed to kind of step into the game, take some onus, just demand the ball off of other players so you can kind of get some moves going. And he didn't do that. He sort of seemed to kind of hide a little bit at times, Lo Celso, in my opinion. So I completely agree with you there, Donovan Davis. But spoken, I think, to our heart's content, we might in some way, probably I might, have some pretty sarcastic tweets, saved up for tomorrow on Twitter about certain players, but I think I might leave it there, everybody. And really do appreciate you all tuning into this one. Jacob, tell me about your channel, and Michael as well. Thank you for joining me for this one. Michael, just because, you don't have a channel yet, maybe before I, get Jacob to plug the channel, any sort of final words or any final comments that you had, that maybe I didn't get to let you say? Michael.
In Ange I trust, and in Ange we should trust, right? I am still 100% behind this guy. Please, people, don't treat me as some Ange hater or whatever, right? I'm gutted that we got knocked out of the Carabao, even if I thought that we couldn't realistically win it. I think that there is always a chance. You sometimes have to take risks. You sometimes have to dream. I think that's it, right? So yeah. On to Burnley we go. I won't lose sleep over this result. I'm just a bit flat. It's just being a bit flat. But on we go. I think Ange is a good enough manager to learn from it. As Jacob said, right? He took an L, and let's convert that L into a learn. And I hope that he shows us that the information that he gathered today. How would he use it in the future, right? So that's it, pretty much.
I know you love Ange Paul, Michael. I mean, you've been desperate for it, especially with some of the fan show appearances you've had in the past, trying to somehow rationalize some of the other bad performances that we've had with other managers. So I know you've enjoyed Ange Paul, and I know you love the big Ange. But Jacob, you seem like a resourceful man. You do have your own YouTube channel that needs a good plug, but I feel like you're a guy that would be able to supply me an Ange fathead of some sort if it doesn't exist. I feel like you'd be a guy that'd be able to design one of some sort.
I mean, I would love
or
one.
you'd probably buy one before me, actually, if anything.
I would absolutely buy one. I would also buy a cardboard cutout, maybe one of those plushy dolls you can keep in the bed with you, keep you nice and warm. I understand today's a tough day for all of us fans who are hoping to see some kind of cup run. I know that's where I was. I said I want to see two deep cup runs, and I want to see us go for it every single Premier League match. And thus far in the Premier League, I'm still satisfied with what I've seen. We've still got 11 guys that we can, well, maybe not 11, but I think we got 9 guys who showed how vital they are to this club, and we showed how thin we are in depth. And these are things that obviously us as fans who've lived it and breathed it for the past several odd years after that Champions League final, it's not been great. And I don't think I ever expected it to be great off the jump. Ainge is not a miracle worker, he's a human. And I think as a human, he has to make these mistakes himself. He has
Become
to
a
go out
better
there
man.
and start Davinson Sanchez and say, you know what, this guy doesn't work for me. He has to go out there and say, look at these. And that's just the way I see it. And Ainge Postecoglou's quotes have backed up that much. So I feel confident in the way that I feel, but I know some people vehemently disagree with me, and it's okay. I think that's part of what makes this such a beautiful and obviously a controversial thing at the same time, because people see it different ways. But again, we don't have minutes and minutes of tape of all of the 9 players coming in. We don't have, except outside of the preseason. Let's look at it real. We saw Solomon for a minute or two versus United, and
Yeah,
that
I
was
can't
it.
write
But
him
people
off.
were still saying he is suitable for this. He is suitable for that. People were saying this about Højbjerg, Lo Celso, and the likes. And I think this was just a test that obviously they all failed. So I'm not too pressed about it at the end of the day.
Sure.
Like Michael said, I'm not going to lose sleep over it by any means, because I never expected this to be a smooth ride. But I'm enjoying the ride regardless.
At the end of the day, he's going to become a better Ange from this.
Yeah.
He's going to become a smarter Ange, a bigger Ange, if anything. Who knows? But
I agree.
also, please, Jacob, plug your channel for me if you can.
Yeah, United Spurs of America. If this topic is pressing on, I may do a show late tonight. I don't know. Or I may just save it for tomorrow, because
Trooper.
I did go and talk a lot. But I do have to, it won't be anytime soon, because I have to go do my fatherly duties. But once the boy goes to sleep, I may say, you know what, I'm just putting on a show later. So if you are interested and you're up and you're fuming still, come yell at me in the chat. United Spurs of America. I'm a pretty good punching bag. I don't take things personal, really, unless you say something overly personal. But having a go at every football opinion I have is very much encouraged. If you disagree with me, I very much encourage you to tell me why, because I'm here to
Hold on
learn and
over.
grow as well. So
Find him.
at the end of the day,
Track him down. If
yeah.
you've disagreed with Jacob, track him down.
Drag
Have
me
him
down, come tell me,
unsubscribe
come
and,
harass me about it. Yeah. Yeah, I'll never not listen to other sides of the argument. And I think that's what makes the world go round. Variety is the spice of life, baby. And I'm too blessed to be stressed. And I guess that's why at the end of the day, I'm not overly concerned. Now, if this is again year 2 or 3 for Ainge, I might be saying I'm very concerned about his decision making. This is his first Carabao Cup loss. We were patient with a few people for that as well. So I think we'll be okay. I still trust Ainge. I trust him with all my heart, and I love him still. Let's think about the Premier League. Ain't lost there yet. We have lost under Ainge, but we ain't lost in the Premier League. And that's something we can at least take into Burnley.
He's going to become a smarter Ange. I'll say it again. He's going to become a better Ange from all of this. Jerome is saying every time Højbjerg plays with Skip in the midfield, he cannot play football anymore. Anyone else, he is a baller. I don't think it's that much of a coincidence. It feels like anybody that Skip's been playing alongside recently, they have not been playing all that well. Even in preseason, it felt like Madison and Basuma sort of had these. I think individually they played well, but in preseason, if you guys recall, we had sort of these iffy kind of halves like in midfield, and Skip was a part of those starting midfields alongside Madison and Basuma. And if he didn't even really stand out in those games alongside those top class midfielders, again, alarm bells I think are ringing about that guy. And I think Højbjerg's a guy that plays well and holds his own when he's around other really good midfielders for me, Jerome. But when he has to carry others in the way that I think Skip kind of in a way, at least right now, needs to be carried, I don't think he's able to do it. And there is something to be said that they're too similar to each other and they're a bit sort of clunky on the ball. They don't have that ability to sort of receive it on the half turn. But I think what Højbjerg has that Skippy simply doesn't is that ability to break the lines with a good pass. Højbjerg has good passing range. I think today he didn't have it as much as, and displayed as much as he usually does, but it still was. I can recall more passes that he made that still helped us in breaking the lines than actually Skippy did. Skippy had one moment in particular where he won the ball back from a really, or he recovered the ball from a really bad giveaway from Fulham, and he played this ridiculous, like, first time left-footed pass into space, and there were multiple forwards open. He had time to take a touch, and he just gave it away so quickly with a left-footed first-time pass in a no man's land. And I really, in that moment, questioned the guy as a midfielder, because I think most midfielders, most Yank midfielders, I mean, American midfielders would take a touch there and think about, what should I do in this situation? Because this is a good opportunity. What he did there really made me question him in that level. And I know everybody loves to really rate on Højbjerg and really go after him, but I've never seen Højbjerg do something to that level where I really have questioned the guy's overall thought process. So I think Skip right now, I've tried to sort of, I'm kind of in Dave's camp and Paul Marquis and others where I don't really rate the guy and don't think he's good enough. But I've also tried not to harp on him too much because I want him to do well. He's from the academy, but today was actually his worst performance I really have ever seen him play. Genuinely his worst performance, I think, in a Spurs shirt. So a lot to be said about Skip. Højbjerg is probably out the door by the looks of things. And at the end of the day, he's had, I think, a very good career at Spurs, and he helped us when we were really, really poor, and he's had good service at this football club. Whereas Skip, I think there's still a lot to be said, and I don't think the story is written yet. Big up to you, Jerome, though, my man. And when Højbjerg, if he does leave, I will have a lot to say about it, because I think he was actually well disrespected during some times here at Spurs. When he, like I said, when we were really shit and when we had nothing going for us, Højbjerg put in some solid performances for us to get us the wins when we either needed it or when we didn't even deserve it, and we still got some wins because Højbjerg put in some solid ones. But I think we'll leave it there tonight, everybody. Hit that like button, please, on the way out. Really do appreciate you guys. Really do appreciate Jerome. Thank you for your support, my man. Donovan Davis, top man as well. Donovan Osterreicher, Ben Kaufman, Talking Ball, Colin, celebrating the member milestones as well. Thank you for your support as members. But we'll be leaving it there, everybody. Get some rest. Have something to eat. Whatever time it is for you guys. You leave it there. All of it's behind us now. Move on to Burnley. Come on, you Spurs. And the big Ange I trust. And the big Ange I want to hug.
Ooh, I want to hug. Quiz. Yeah, I want to hug too.
Big Ange, we hug.
Everywhere we go.